We continue our candidate conversations this election season with the final contender for Duval County Judge Group 9. I'm joined now by public defender and judicial candidate Shayla Lee. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Ann?
I'm great. Thanks so much for being here, Shayla.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I greatly appreciate it.
So, your opponent, Matthew Lufrano, was on yesterday's First Coast Connect on Tuesday. I'm not sure if you had a chance to listen or if you have any thoughts about the case that he made for his own candidacy.
Actually, I have not had a chance to listen. I am currently still working, so I've been very busy. So I have not had a chance to listen to his broadcast.
So I think, big picture, he says he's got the most experience and is therefore the most qualified to be a Duval County judge. There's just the two of you in this race. What is your feeling about your qualifications, and what's your case for being our next county judge?
Sure. So I believe I'm definitely qualified, and I do have the experience. It may not be the same number of years. However, I think my experience is a lot broader, being that I've done some child dependency work, I've done some private practice, I'm doing criminal defense. And so all of those things together, I think, give me a very unique perspective that I don't think is currently represented on the bench. And so I'd like to bring that to the Duval County Court bench. And I do believe I'm prepared for that role.
So you're currently in the public defender's office. A lot of our judges, as I noted yesterday, come from the prosecutor's office, not
Correct.
very often from a criminal defense background. Now, your opponent is
Yes.
also a criminal defense lawyer,
Yes.
so you're similar in that respect. Um, what do you think someone who comes from a criminal defense background, like how would they be a different kind of judge than somebody who comes from a prosecutorial background?
Sure. So I think when you're a prosecutor, obviously you're focused on the particular mission, like of representing the state, and you're zoned in on finding those things that are going to help you prove your case. As a public defender, I'm doing that, but I'm wearing multiple hats, right? Because I need to be able to tell my client how is it possible for the state to actually prove their case, right? So I'm reviewing the same evidence that they are, but I'm also concentrated on making sure that my client's rights are being protected. And a lot of times people don't think about that aspect of it when they're so focused on getting the conviction. And so it's important to make sure that the client's rights are being respected. And in addition to that, I think as a public defender, a lot of times we take on a little bit of a social justice role as well, almost like a social worker, where there is something here happening with my client, and maybe getting to the root of that problem will assist my client not only with this case, but making sure that they don't come back again with a different case or under different circumstances. So, as a public defender, again, I'm wearing these different hats and bringing all of those things together. And so I think that that's what brings a different perspective to the bench. And I think that it's important that people understand that.
And so, if you're elected, how do you think that background of yours would inform how you run a courtroom and how you interact with lawyers and defendants?
Sure. So my background, like I said, is deeply rooted in the people, right? So coming from child dependency, a lot of times, again, I'm working with families to try to figure out what's going on with this family, whether it's poverty, whether it's mental health issues, whether it's substance abuse. All of those things factor into how people come into the criminal justice system or how they just come into contact with the court system, period, right? And so I've been very particular about making sure that I don't forget the people, right? Because this is a huge system. The judicial system can be very intimidating for someone who, first of all, is already in a vulnerable state. Whatever has happened in their life, it's probably not a great thing, right? Either something has caused them to make a bad decision, or there's something that's influencing them that they might not be able to control, like the substance abuse or the mental health. And so making sure that we don't forget the humanity of what we do. And also making sure that while we're following the letter of the law, we're not forgetting the spirit of the law, which is making sure our communities are safe and making sure people are protected, but also making sure that there's justice and that there's some compassion in doing that.
We're talking to Shayla Lee. She is the Group 9 Duval County judicial candidate for county court. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can call us at 904-549-2937, or you can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also reach out on social media. And so we kind of discussed briefly yesterday as well that, a county court judge hears misdemeanor cases, not felonies, and civil cases that are under $30,000. You also assign bail and decide whether to issue bond. And because you're handling misdemeanors, a lot of times those cases will not be the high profile cases that we are reading about or seeing on the television. But um, sometimes they're high profile. There
Yes,
are
they can
occasions,
be.
right? And you will we'd have to make decisions in a very perhaps intense media and political environment about whether to grant someone bond.
Right.
How would you make those decisions? I mean, how would you manage in the limelight, and how would you, make those decisions based on the law and your reasoning and not maybe public sentiment?
Right. And so I think it's important, even when they're high profile cases, to focus on the case and the people and the facts that are in front of you, right? It's not about what's being said in the media. A lot of times when I listen to stories about, news pieces about different cases, what I hear on the news versus what I'm seeing in the courtroom doesn't always add up, right? Because there's a certain, media is there for a reason. They're not just there to inform, they're there to entertain. So there comes in some extra things with that. But with the law, we have to focus on the law. And so I think that's what we have to do. That's what I would do in those situations is you have to tune out the outside noise and focus on the facts that are being presented to you in the courtroom, not the things that you're hearing on the news, right? And I think if you do that, again, it brings the sense of humanity back to it when we're focused on the person in front of us and not necessarily the chatterings and media. When we're focused on that and applying the facts that you have to the law, I don't think you can go wrong in that instance, right? And so that's my focus is to make sure that I am paying attention to what's being said to people, so that takes a sense of patience, an even temperament so that you're able to receive information from both sides and weigh that information to decide what's the best thing for me to do in this particular instance with these set of facts and these people that are in front of me.
What do you think is the most important characteristic of a good judge?
I do think it is having that even temperament because, especially in county court, again, we're dealing with sometimes people that are representing themselves, pro se clients. So they are not necessarily well versed in the law. They didn't go to law school, but they do have the ability to advocate for themselves. So sometimes you have to be a little more patient in that circumstance and not be so quick to, dismiss someone because they don't know the particular legal term that they're trying to convey to you. But if you understand what they're saying to you and you're giving that person that respect and that attention, I think that that's what's important. Again, humanity and focusing on the people, because again, judges are public servants. And so it's important to remember that we're here to serve the community in that aspect. Even though we are dealing with law and legal things, it's still about the community and keeping the community safe and making sure that people have a trust and also a respect for the legal system.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you someone that came to the law young, that always wanted to be a lawyer when you grew up? How did you get to where you are now?
So I would say that I did grow up always wanting to be in the law involved. I had dreams of being a judge very young,
Really?
but I did not have a straight path there, if that makes sense. So there was definitely times where I switched it up in middle school. I went to Darnell Cookman here. I thought I wanted to be a medical a doctor, so I was in the medical magnet there. And of course, when I went off to college, I did public relations, and I thought about going into the PR field and things like that. But there's something about the law that's always called me back to it. And so once I had my oldest daughter, in that time point in my life, it was a reckoning of I need to focus because now I got this little person coming up and I got to be able to direct them in their life. And so that brought me back to, you know what, I've been running from this. I need to focus on the talent that God blessed me with, really, is what it boils down to. And so that's what brought me back to the law and coming back here to Jacksonville. I decided to go to Florida Coastal. And I started in the child dependency. And actually, that started for me at Florida Coastal. I did an externship with Department of Children and Families, and I didn't even realize that that area of the law existed until I'd done that. And so at that point, it really clicked for me, like, this is my purpose. This is what I'm here to do, is to help people. And the best way that I can help people is to use the talents I have. Like I said, advocating for people, being compassionate about people, and having a sense of wanting to make sure that I leave this world in a better place than I found it.
child dependency cases are particularly harrowing, and you're
Yes,
dealing with cases where families are in crisis, children possibly suffering some kind of abuse, parents
absolutely.
often in extremis themselves.
Mhm.
Is there any experience that you had doing that work that stays with you, or that, affected how you look at the law and the job of either a lawyer or a judge?
Absolutely. I think it was always the, overwhelming sense that I got from people, again, of exactly what you said. They were in crisis, and you could tell. It's almost like you could feel the sense of, um them being afraid of the unknown, right? Because, obviously we're stepping in. So possibly we've removed or separated a family who is not used to that, right? So now you've created an uncomfortable situation amongst people who are already in crisis. And so, what I've learned from that experience, again, with people, is that you cannot you cannot help someone if you're not first meeting their needs, right? And so to just go into it with just the idea of, okay, by the letter, by the book, let's just close this case and, give them some services. And no, let's get to the heart of how these people came to this, to get into this situation. And if we get to the root of the issues in that family and concentrate on making sure that we're addressing those things, that's how we make the community safer, right? Because if we're just, um, going about regular days, just putting people in jail, taking children away from families, but not addressing how those people got to that situation, it's bound to happen again. And so that's what I think is the biggest thing. I know I say it a lot, but it is truly making sure that we're connecting with people on a level that makes sense to them so that they understand where we're coming from. And I think bridging that gap, making sure that they understand why they're in this situation and what we can do to help make that situation better, by also still following the law, giving them some resources, but also when it's necessary, stepping in and saying, listen, we can't have this. This has to be corrected. And if we've already tried this route and it's not working, then we got to do something different. And so sometimes it does take a firm stance of saying, okay, enough is enough. But I think it's important that you're still able to do that with some sort of compassion.
We're talking to Shayla Lee. She is a candidate for county court judge here in Duval County. And you are welcome to join our conversation by calling us or emailing firstcoastconnect at wjct.org. We got a message from Curtis on the north side. He said, "Can you provide examples of cases that will cross your desk as a judge?" And of course, you're not allowed with any specificity to talk about how
Sure.
you would rule on anything, but what kinds of cases are you going to be seeing?
So, of course, with the criminal misdemeanor cases, a lot of those are traffic offenses. If I'm being honest, people driving without a valid driver's license, I see those countless times.
And
But
DUIs, I
also,
would
right,
guess, too. Yeah.
DUIs, also more serious traffic offenses, leaving the scene of accidents. You're also going to see things like domestic batteries or batteries, that aren't domestic, but just with people that are not necessarily living in the same household. So those type of cases. Outside the criminal aspect, though, there's also the small claims court where people are just in a dispute with someone about either a monetary thing or property. And then there's landlord tenant issues that judges will also see. And one of the most important things I think that the county court judges do is they do sit in first appearance court. So when someone is arrested, it's typically a county court judge that's going to decide whether that person can have a bond, and if so, what that bond looks like. Can it be non-monetary? Will it be monetary? Will you put other conditions on it? And so those are very important real-time decisions that county court judges have to make. And I think that's one of the most important things that they do because it's involving the community, keeping the community safe, but again, also balancing the individual that's in front of me and balancing their rights, and how, if I do keep this person in jail without a bond, what kind of trickle of down effect will that have? If this person has a family, if this person has a job or a house, I've seen very quickly how someone who's not able to post a bond can then lose their job. And now, what are their kids going to do? How are they going to make that rent payment? How are they going to pay that car note? So, making sure that you're taking all of those things into consideration and making the best choice or the best decision that you can for that particular case in whatever circumstance that person is in.
And so there's been a movement nationally away from, cash bail bonds. I
Absolutely.
can never remember the difference, but away from
Yes.
cash bail requiring, a
Right.
cash deposit in order to bond out. Um, do you have a position on whether that's appropriate, as a tool or perhaps could be used more, than it is currently?
I think, in 2024, I think everyone should recognize that, some people just are not at a level where they can afford a lot of things, right? And so bond is one of those things that can be very expensive. And so what I think it's important to do is, again, case by case, take a look at the circumstances. If I were to give this person a non-monetary bond, is that also keeping the community safe? Right. And I think that there are some instances where absolutely we could release someone, going back to what I said before, who is driving without a driver's license, right? Is it necessary to compile what's probably already a financial issue and a reason why they don't have the license to compound that by now giving them a bond? Or can we put a GPS monitor on this person or give them the release them on their own recognizance and say, you're not permitted to drive? I think that those are things that we have to look at, but it has to be on a case by case basis because that's not going to apply to everyone, right? Because the person who's been driving on a suspended license 10 times maybe doesn't get that opportunity because they've had some already. But I do think it's definitely important to look at each case, each individual, and make the best decision for that. But I agree that non-monetary bonds could be utilized in a higher level, especially when we're looking at the current state of the economy and how people are able to function and pay for things.
And yet those decisions about, when you're in first appearance court, those are almost split second decisions that you have to make one after another after
Yes.
another. How do you think on your feet that quickly?
Well, again, it's about gathering information, right? So if you don't ask the questions, you don't know. So I think it's important, again, to ask those questions from the bench and to inquire of a person's circumstances, not just of their monetary circumstances, but again, what does your household look like? How is this going to affect the people around you? And still, again, balancing the community because if this person has been arrested, is there a victim out there that also needs to be protected? So not just looking at this person and their situation, but also the victims and the community. And again, making sure that public safety is top priority, but giving some compassion where it's due.
Well, Shayla Lee, she is running for the Group 9 county court position. The election is November 5th. Everybody should vote regardless of how they vote. Thanks so much for
Absolutely.
being here, Shayla Lee. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity.